Okay, let us just see.
Stream Elements said Matt sucks at everything is now live. Streaming software and game development, learning Unreal Engine, Day 10.
Okay, shut up. I've had enough of you. Let me just see what my stuff is looking like. Do you want to try and here's the category here. Just changing this up. Unreal Engine 5. Oh, they do not make it easy. Doesn't let me add a game title for Unreal Engine. Let's just check your software development. Sure. Create playlist. New playlist. Modifying a couple things here. It's not made for kids, but it is kid friendly. No. Let's also go to English, recording date, license. Sure. Perfect. My bitrate's too high. That's okay. Would be pretty cool if it actually showed me where this is at, so I can just see my stream. Oh, here we go. I'm just messing with this for 1 second. Hold on. Just see my stream. Oh, here we go. This is good. This is good. Nice high quality stream. That's fantastic. I'll just close some windows here. I gotta get back some browser business. I'll save that. I have so many Chrome browser windows open right now. Okay, I got stuff by Quest Dev. Oh my goodness, I'm falling behind here. Okay, let me just check. See if the Twitch is up and running. Oh yes, yes it is. 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 Perfect. Let's shut that bad boy down. Okay, where is my chorus? Uno momento, por favor. Oh man, I got so much open on this one too. I wonder how much CPU I'm using right now. Probably too much. streaming in 2025. I do this. 5 tips and tricks you probably don't know about Unreal Engine 5. 100 insane. Okay, good. Let's get rid of some of these Amazon books. Good thing you guys can see everything I'm doing over there because it's super important. This one needs to go over to my other Chrome browser. Let me just get that open. Oh. 3. Yes. This is why. Okay, let me check my task manager. Google Chrome is using up 7%. Okay, it's not too bad. CPU. Chrome's not doing too bad. Okay, you know what? We're doing okay. We're doing okay. Okay, we're hopping into the next section here. I stopped yesterday because I finally got past most of the stuff. Now I'm getting into constants, or coordinates, and vector normalization and rotators. Vectors, rotators, and trigonometry. So this is going to be exciting to follow this. Who's with me? Yay. Go Girlfriend didn't get a belt clip. I saw her belt on the bed, so I grabbed it. I said, "Do you need this belt?" She said, "Yes." After she left, I'm like, "Oh, there's a belt clip sitting on the bag." Well, that's not great. It's just for tools, so. Anyways, should be okay for a day. Get into it. Let's just get into it.
Welcome, In this lecture, we're going to talk about coordinates. Imagine a red arrow pointing from left to right. Imagine you are a red dot sitting on this line. Now imagine that the line has tick marks every 10 yards. This arrow has a direction and it's pointed to the right. So the numbers increase as you move to the right and decrease as you move to the left. Now imagine that you're stuck on this red line. You can move forward and you can move backward, but you must stay on the red line. Since you can only move back and forth, your movement is restricted to a single dimension. This dimension, represented by the red arrow, will be called x. We can call this red line the x-axis. X extends forward and backward forever. The tick marks on x continue to increase in the positive x direction indefinitely. The same goes for the negative tick marks. They continue to decrease and get more and more negative as you move backwards in the negative x direction. Now let's say that your starting position is at 0 on the x-axis. We will call this your x-coordinate. Wherever you move on the x-axis, your position can be represented by your x-coordinate, a numerical value that shows how far away you are from 0. A numerical value like this is called a scalar. The word scalar quite literally means a numerical quantity. In this case, it represents your distance from the 0 point on the x-axis. Now, you can still move forwards and backwards in the x direction, and the distance you travel in the x direction is still represented by your x-coordinate. However, now imagine a green arrow perpendicular to the x-axis and intersecting it at the 0 point. We will call this green arrow the y-axis. Now, you can still move forwards and backwards in the x direction, and the distance you travel in the x direction is still represented by your x-coordinate. However, now that this new dimension exists, the y dimension, you also have a y-coordinate as well. This scalar value represents your distance from the 0 point on the y-axis. So now that you can move back and forth in both the x and the y directions, your movement is now two-dimensional, and your position can be represented by both your x and your y coordinates. We refer to these as your xy coordinates, typically shown in parentheses with your x coordinate first, then a comma, then your y coordinate. We call this an ordered pair. Wherever you move in this 2D space, your xy coordinates represent your position, x being your distance in the x direction from 0, and y being your distance in the y direction from 0. At this point here, your xy coordinates are 10, 10, because you've traveled 10 yards in the x direction and 10 yards in the y direction. Your xy coordinates here are 20, 10, because you've traveled 20 in the x, but you've still only traveled 10 in the y. Your xy coordinates here are 20, 20, as you've traveled 20 in the x and you've traveled 20 in the y. Moving around by changing your xy coordinates, your movement is restricted to the xy plane. The xy plane is the set of all xy coordinates you could possibly move to. Now let's imagine a third arrow perpendicular to both the x and y axes, running through their 0 points.
Oh, God.
We will call this third arrow the z-axis, and its positive direction is straight up, and its negative direction is straight down. Now your location is represented by 3 coordinates, an x, a y, and a z coordinate. We call this set of coordinates your xyz coordinates, and they can be represented by an ordered triple, with x first, then y, and then z last.
Funny. When I saw the last image back here, I was like, "Oh, y is vertical, x is left and right." No, I'm looking straight down on it. I gotta remember
coordinates
that.
your xyz coordinates.
Simple.
And they can be represented by an ordered triple, with x first, then y, and then z last.
Z.
In any coordinate system, the point where all coordinates are equal to 0 is called the origin. That's right here in the three-dimensional coordinate system. And in 2D space, it would be the point 0, 0. So in summary, we learned about coordinates. and how a scalar is a single numerical value. In one-dimensional space, we could represent our distance from 0 on the x-axis by a scalar value. We also learned that our x-coordinate is our position along the x-axis, and xy coordinates represent our position on the xy plane, and that these are represented by an ordered pair. We learned that xyz coordinates represent our position in three-dimensional space, and these are represented by an ordered triple, with x first, then y, then z last. And we learned that in any coordinate system, the point in space where all coordinates are 0 is the origin. So in three-dimensional space, the point 0, 0, 0 is the world origin. And in 2D space, that would be 0, 0. So now we understand coordinates, and these are crucial to understanding vectors, which we'll talk about next.
Oh God, we're getting into the math, which means the programming is coming up next, which means I'm about to have a lot of fun. I am not looking forward to this.
Imagine we have a point in 2D space with xy coordinates 5, 5, and we have another point at 20, 20. Now imagine that we draw an arrow starting at 5, 5 and ending at 20, 20.
So you would
an
add
arrow
15,
with a starting
15.
point and an ending point
change.
is known as a vector. A vector contains two pieces of information, a direction and a magnitude. This vector has a well-defined direction because we know its starting location and its ending location. We say that its tail is at 5, 5 and its head is at 20, 20. This vector also has a well-defined magnitude because we know how long it is. Magnitude just means size or extent. A vector's magnitude is represented by its length. So if a vector contains direction and how long it is, we say that a vector has a vector can 20. An arrow with a starting point and an ending point is known as a vector. A vector contains two pieces of information, a direction and a magnitude. This vector has a well-defined direction because we know its starting location and its ending location. We say that its tail is at 5, 5 and its head is at 20, 20. This vector also has a well-defined magnitude because we know how long it is. Magnitude just means size or extent. A vector's magnitude is represented by its length. So if a vector contains direction and magnitude information, how is that information stored? Well, similar to 2D coordinates, which are stored in an ordered pair, a 2D vector has x and y components. How do we figure out the x and y components of this vector, starting at 5, 5 and ending at 20, 20?
Basic math.
Well, we see how far we must travel in the x and y directions to get from the tail to the head. In the x direction, we must travel 15 units to get from 5 to 20. We must also travel 15 units to get from 5 to 20 in the y direction. So the x and y components of this vector are 15, 15. The first 15 is the vector's x component, and the second 15 is the vector's y component. Now, we were able to just look at the coordinates at the head and the tail and see that it took 15 units in the x and 15 in the y to get from the tail to the head. But how did we arrive at this conclusion mathematically? Well, the vector's tail is at 5, 5 and its head is at 20, 20. Let's call this first point at the tail point 1 and the second point at the head point 2. So this vector, which we'll call v, has its x and y components equal to 20 minus 5 for the x and 20 minus 5 for the y. This gives us x and y components 15, 15. We can generalize this even further by saying that any vector starting at point 1 and ending at point 2, with coordinates x1, y1 at the tail and x2, y2 at the head, has xy components equal to this formula. The vector's x component is x2 minus x1, and its y component is y2 minus y1. So we subtract the coordinates of point 1 from point 2, first in the x, then in the y. Now let's say we have this vector, starting at the origin, 0, 0, and ending at this point here, 5, 10. Now let's call this vector v1. Now we can calculate its x and y components fairly easily. We know that its components are 5, 10. We subtracted head minus tail for x and y. 5 minus 0 gave us 5, and 10 minus 0 gave us 10. So far, so good. Now imagine we have this other vector, and this vector starts from the point 10, 5 and ends at the point 15, 15. Let's call this vector 2. Now we can subtract the tail from the head for both x and y, and 15 minus 10 gives us 5 for the x, and 15 minus 5 gives us 10 for the y. Now because v1 and v2 have the same x and y components, we say that these two vectors are equal. v1 and v2 are the same vector. Now that might not sit right with you. You might be thinking, wait a minute, these vectors can't be the same, they're in different locations. It doesn't matter. A vector is only defined by its direction and its magnitude. These two vectors are pointed in the exact same direction, and they both have the exact same length. Their directions and magnitudes are equal, therefore the two vectors are the same. This implies an important point. We can have other vectors in this xy plane, with different starting locations and ending locations, and it doesn't matter where we start them or end them. If their x and y components are all equal, these are all the same vector. All that matters is their direction and their magnitude. So in summary, we've learned that a vector has two pieces of information, a direction and a magnitude. And we learned that it has x and y components if it's a two-dimensional vector. In 3 dimensions, it has x, y, and z components. And we learned that two vectors are equal if their x and y components are equal. If their components are equal, then that means their direction and their magnitude are equal. And these are the only things that matter when determining if two vectors are the same. It doesn't matter where they start in the xy plane or in the 3-dimensional world. We've also learned that we could calculate a vector's components by subtracting point 1 from point 2 for the x and y coordinates. So we have this formula for the vector from point 1 to point 2. It's always going to be the coordinates at the head minus the coordinates at the tail for both the x and y components. So now we have an understanding of what a vector is. It's now time to learn some of the things we can do with vectors.
Yay!
Great job. I'll see you in the next lecture.
13 minutes talking about vectors. This is going to be difficult. This is going to be difficult. Just going to leave it on that just for a second there. Something that my stream's rate is a little bit high here on YouTube. I guess I could turn that down a little bit. Let's do 7,000 kilobytes per second. Let's see what it says. Time for some C++.
So let's see how this works with a few examples. I have a two-dimensional coordinate system here
Oh,
to the
Steven!
left, and I have
actually see
a
'em.
three-dimensional coordinate system to the right. So let's start with something a little more basic. We'll start with our two-dimensional coordinate system here. Now let's say that we have a character and an enemy. And our character has two-dimensional coordinates here on the two-dimensional xy plane. Let's say that the character's x coordinate is 4 and the character's y coordinate is also 4. So if we draw the character's location here on the xy plane, its xy coordinates are going to be 4, 4. Okay? Now, let's say that we